Ethan, wake up! Wake up! What's wrong with you?
Relieved, Emily.
I exclaimed, almost instinctively pulling her into my arms. Feeling the softness and warmth in my embrace, I finally dared to believe that this was real, truly Emily.
Concerned, what's wrong?
Her voice was soft, and her small hands gently stroked my back. My tense nerves finally relaxed. I still held her, looking at the familiar surroundings. Although it was hard to believe, I must have been reborn.
Serious, I'm fine.
My eyes were filled with determination. A hand brushed across my forehead. Did they bully you again?
Worried, did they bully you again?
Whispering, no, they didn't.
I silently scolded myself. How could I let my woman worry? In this life, she must eat well, drink well, have fun, and be happy and safe for the rest of her life.
Hopeful, let's go back.
Cheerful, sure.
A cold wind blew through the tree-lined path, and I shivered. Just as I was about to leave with Emily, my stepbrother Brian, who had taken over my family, appeared in front of me.
Unfriendly. Well, isn't this my little brother? Dad told you to study hard in college, and here you are with a girlfriend. How irresponsible, especially after all the money Dad gives you every year.
In my previous life, it was here that I had a conflict with him. He and his friends had pushed me into the water, and I struggled for a long time before the school staff came to rescue me, thanks to Emily's screams. This time, I looked at the people he brought and decided to leave with Emily.
Serious, let's go, Emily.
But they were just as malicious as before, not intending to let me go.
Mocking. Who said you could leave?
Andrew raised an eyebrow, and someone stepped forward. He had even changed his surname to become part of Alex's family. How ironic. They surrounded Emily and me. Andrew's playful gaze swept over Emily.
Unfriendly. Your little girlfriend is quite pretty. If you let me take her, I promise not to bother you anymore.
Rage surged within me, but I knew now was not the time to act impulsively. I slowly raised my hand, the glowing numbers 110 standing out in the dim light.
Serious, officer, you heard that. There are 10 people planning to attack me and my girlfriend. If I defend myself and someone gets hurt, there's a recording to prove it was self-defense.
As I spoke, I stared directly at Andrew. I smirked. During those 10 years in prison, every moment I thought about tearing him apart. If he didn't let us go now, I would fight back.
Angry. Let's go.
Andrew looked into my eyes, which were like those of a fierce animal, and took a step back. Emily worriedly held my hand, and my heart warmed. The voice on the phone asked, "What's the address?"
Frightened. Officer, we're just messing around.
Serious, Kyoto University, Andrew, I'm not joking.
Seeing that I was serious, Andrew spat on the ground. "Let's go." They eventually gave up on attacking. Before leaving, Andrew's face was filled with frustration, no longer the arrogant disdain he usually showed. In the past, Ethan was foolish. He always thought that if he went back to his father after being beaten half to death, he would show him a bit of pity. It wasn't until the last time, when his father personally broke his spine, that Ethan finally understood he was never worthy of being called a father. The next day, Ethan took a day off and walked through the streets of Kyoto, trying to find a place from his memory. It was the road Emily took to go home. But his phone kept ringing incessantly. Annoyed, he glanced at it and saw it was that devil of a father. He immediately hung up. It wasn't until he finally found the house in the alley that he answered the call in a better mood.
How did I raise such a worthless son? Get back home and apologize to your brother. Samuel, my mother only gave birth to me. Where did this brother come from? If you want to raise someone else's child, don't involve me.
Ethan sneered and hung up amidst his father's furious roars. Taking a deep breath, he knocked on the door of the house. He explained his purpose and showed them the photos on his phone, along with the few words the elderly couple had told him in his previous life. the elderly couple in the house were overjoyed. They insisted he stay and made a phone call. Ethan waited for a long time, from dawn till dusk. During that time, Emily called him twice, but he brushed her off with vague answers. He wanted to give her real parents, not some empty hope. As night fell, a middle-aged couple finally walked down the small alley. The man was energetic, and the woman was elegant, with features that bore a striking resemblance to Emily.
You said you brought news of my daughter?
He asked, his presence intimidating. An ordinary person would have been too scared to speak. But Ethan had been reborn. Who could be more terrifying than the people he met during his 10 years in prison? That mother and son tried their best to torment him, but he endured for 10 years, until he found Emily's biological parents and came back with his memories. Ethan controlled his excitement. He was going to spend his life with Emily, and he wanted to leave a good impression on them. He pulled out his phone and handed it to them respectfully. He remained silent, watching as they grew more and more emotional. Tears welled up in the woman's eyes.
She's now at Kyoto University, doing very well in her studies. But she had a tough time in the orphanage.
What do you want?
I want her to be safe and healthy.
He felt them glance at him, a subtle look in their eyes.
What is your relationship with her?
I'm her boyfriend, and we've been together for 3 years. My name is Ethan. My father is Samuel, but the Alex family is a second-rate family, insignificant in your eyes. Moreover, I was kicked out of the house when I was 2. Now, Emily and I rely on each other.
They looked at him with some surprise.
Do you know who we are?
I do.
We'll give you one more chance. Think carefully. What do you want?
I want her to live a safe, healthy, and happy life.
He couldn't imagine her falling in front of him again. He couldn't bear to hold her cold body in his arms again. He couldn't spend another 10 years repeatedly picturing her face. His hands clenched into fists, his emotions nearly overflowing. Until a voice came from outside the alley.
Ethan. Ethan, where are you?
They surrounded Emily and me. Andrew's playful gaze swept over Emily.
Your little girlfriend is quite pretty. If you let me take her, I promise not to bother you anymore.
Rage surged within me, but I knew now was not the time to act impulsively. I slowly raised my hand, the glowing numbers 110 standing out in the dim light.
Officer, you heard that. There are 10 people planning to attack me and my girlfriend. If I defend myself and someone gets hurt, there's a recording to prove it was self-defense.
As I spoke, I stared directly at Andrew. I smirked. During those 10 years in prison, every moment I thought about tearing him apart. If he didn't let us go now, I would fight back. Andrew looked into my eyes, which were like those of a fierce animal, and took a step back. Emily worriedly held my hand, and my heart warmed.
What's the address?
Officer, we're just messing around.
Kyoto University, Andrew, I'm not joking.
Seeing that I was serious, Andrew spat on the ground.
Let's go.
They eventually gave up on attacking. Before leaving, Andrew's face was filled with frustration, no longer the arrogant disdain he usually showed. Until I was pulled away, until the scenery around me blurred, until someone held me and cried. My heart tightened. It was Emily crying.
Don't cry, don't cry. As long as you're okay, I'm fine.
She cried even harder. My vision blurred, and I realized my forehead was bleeding. Someone supported me from the other side.
You're a good kid. I approve of this marriage.
My head spun, and when I woke up again, I was in the hospital. Emily sat beside me, her eyes still red.
You're awake.
She rushed to me, but carefully. I smiled and hugged her tightly.
I'm fine.
The sound of an argument came from outside the room.
Let me in, I'm his father.
The door was pushed open, and my long-lost father, Charles, entered with his wife.
How dare you hit your brother? I sent you to school for so many years, and this is what you learned? Did you learn nothing? Now, break up with this woman immediately and come home. I need to educate you properly.
Emily stood silently by my bed, holding my arm, a bit scared. I reassured her with a look. My silly girl, you're the daughter of a powerful family in Kyoto. As long as you don't break the law, no one can touch you. I rubbed my head, the white bandage wrapped around it. My father acted as if he didn't see it. I smiled and got up from the bed, walking towards them.
Your father is such a kind person. How could he raise a son like you? If you don't want your father to educate you, we won't hesitate to send you to the police.
My father looked like he wanted to devour me, and my stepmother's eyes were filled with malice. I suddenly swung my hand, slapping her face. Her delicate makeup smeared on my palm, and I wiped it off in disgust.
How many surgeries did it take for you to look like my mother?
She looked at me in disbelief, clinging to my father's arm, crying pitifully. My father stared at me, raising his hand to slap me, but I pushed him away.
Old man, where did this brother come from? As a stepfather, how can you face our ancestors during the Qingming festival?
Charles's face turned red with anger.
You ungrateful son. I disown you.
Cut off his credit cards. He's too spoiled. If he dares to hit his brother and me, he'll dare to hit you next.
I squinted my eyes and slapped her again.
Shut up.
In my previous life, this woman had tormented me countless times. This was just a small payback. Her surgically altered nose was crooked from my slap. She screamed, covering it, crying even harder.
Get out. Get out of Kyoto now. I don't have a son like you. Leave immediately.
A booming voice preceded the arrival of my father-in-law.
Who dares to tell my son-in-law to leave Kyoto?
My stepmother, when confused, was truly confused.
My husband disciplining his own son is none of your business.
My hand itched again, but this time, Charles slapped her. The force was heavier than mine, it looked painful. Emily's biological father walked towards us, looking at me with approval.
I accept this son-in-law.
I was delighted. I had mentally prepared myself that if Emily acknowledged her family, there would be a gap between us, potentially hindering our relationship. But I didn't expect my father-in-law to accept me so quickly.
Dad, please sit here.
I moved closer to my father-in-law, following his lead. Seeing me speak, my father-in-law raised an eyebrow, looking expectantly at Emily behind me.
Dad. Dad.
It's okay, take your time.
I'll be with you.
Though my father-in-law's expression remained calm, his clenched fingers revealed his inner joy. My Emily was so endearing, her soft dad probably melted his heart.
You hit me? How dare you hit me?
For years, she had relied on her resemblance to my mother to get whatever she wanted, acting as the mistress of our house. She had forgotten her place. Slap. Another slap, knocking her to the ground. Charles was ruthless. Finally, it was quiet.
I'm sorry for disturbing you, Mr. Smith. But my son.
Sir, we apologize for the oversight. We'll escort them out immediately to avoid further disturbance.
The security was respectful, bowing and smiling at my father-in-law, forcefully removing the two. My father-in-law didn't spare them a glance. I couldn't help but smirk. Charles gave me a deep look before leaving, and my stepmother, no longer daring to shout, left quietly.
Dad, the issues with that family might have bothered you. I'll handle it.
You've had a tough life. If you need anything, contact Secretary Lisa.
I knew I was benefiting from Emily. Indeed, she was my lucky star. I held Emily's hand.
Thank you.
The haunting image of Emily in distress fueled my drive for revenge. During my hospital stay, I wasn't idle. I had Secretary Lisa take over several profitable projects from Alex's family. Yes, it was a legitimate takeover. Charles called me multiple times, but I ignored them. His furious texts were deleted without a second thought. He had no right to scold me. My revenge began by destroying the career he had worked so hard for, causing Andrew and his mother to quarrel over greed, making their lives miserable. Emily scratched my face, and I looked down, my anger dissipating, replaced by tenderness. On the day of discharge, Emily insisted on carrying all the bags and items. She had grown up in hardship and naturally didn't want to waste anything from the hospital. When Secretary Lisa picked us up, she looked at us with a mix of amusement and helplessness.
Secretary Lisa, don't laugh. Waste is shameful.
You're right. Friendly, Mr. Ethan, please get in the car.
Although I wasn't short on money, I wasn't living a life of daily luxury and fancy cars. So when Emily and I got into the car, she looked around in amazement.
In the future, you'll be driving me around in this fancy car. It's so cool,
I said, patting Emily's hand with a smile. Emily gave me a clear, bright smile. My Emily was truly beautiful. I couldn't help but plant a light kiss on her forehead. Emily's face turned bright red, making my heart even softer. The public banquet that was supposed to happen earlier had been postponed due to my injury. Today, my father planned to introduce me as well. At the banquet, all the big names from Kyoto came to show their support. Emily attended in full dress, and when I saw her, I was stunned. Walking beside her, I felt incredibly honored. I really had good taste. But there's always someone to spoil the mood. That family, like lingering ghosts, still showed up. I saw Andrew's venomous gaze. He ran towards us, raising his hand to hit me. I grabbed his wrist, unable to suppress a chuckle. Acting like a clown in such a setting only showed how foolish he was.
You lucky bastard. If you give this girl to me, I can put in a good word for you with father, and you can return to Alex's family.
Yes, in my past life, I endured so much just to return to Alex's family, for a sliver of fatherly love and affection. Now, I just wondered how he could be so stupid. How could I have let Emily be harmed by such a fool in my past life?
Do you want to get hurt?
I tightened my grip and took a step forward, glaring at him fiercely. Andrew instinctively took a step back but then remembered his previous arrogance towards me. He hadn't realized that I had changed since the beating at the academy.
What are you so attached to? This girl isn't pure anymore. How else do you think she got into our academy?
Malicious people see others as malicious. He wanted to ruin Emily's reputation, and I couldn't tolerate that. I kicked Andrew, catching him off guard and sending him sprawling to the ground.
You ungrateful brat. Who do you think you are? How dare you hit me again and again? I've been too lenient with you. Ethan, let go of me, or I'll have father deal with you. Everyone, look at him. He's willing to betray his brother and father just to climb up.
I picked at my ear. He still hadn't recovered from the internal injuries I gave him before, so he was no match for me. Now, under my foot, he howled but had no eloquence. I looked into the distance and saw Charles's face darken, but he didn't intend to intervene. I understood they wanted to ruin my chance to rise.
Luna, they want to stop me from climbing up.
My Emily was furious. I had seen her softness and resilience, but this was the first time I saw her anger. They surrounded Emily and me. Andrew's playful gaze swept over Emily.
Your little girlfriend is quite pretty. If you let me take her, I promise not to bother you anymore.
Rage surged within me, but I knew now was not the time to act impulsively. I slowly raised my hand, the glowing numbers 110 standing out in the dim light.
Officer, you heard that. There are 10 people planning to attack me and my girlfriend. If I defend myself and someone gets hurt, there's a recording to prove it was self-defense.
As I spoke, I stared directly at Andrew. Andrew looked into my eyes, which were like those of a fierce animal, and took a step back. Emily worriedly held my hand, and my heart warmed.
What's the address?
Officer, we're just messing around.
Kyoto University, Andrew, I'm not joking.
Seeing that I was serious, Andrew spat on the ground.
Let's go.
They eventually gave up on attacking. Before leaving, Andrew's face was filled with frustration, no longer the arrogant disdain he usually showed. Every day, Emily and I received various gifts and apology letters at our seats, some from those who had once hit us, others from those who had insulted us. Such is human nature. Our research project had just concluded, so I took Emily to the Anderson family's business and attended an auction. This auction featured a particularly important piece of real estate. In my previous life, I had seen the news about this auction while in prison. Alex's family had risen to prominence in Kyoto because of this property. So, even when Mr. and Mrs. Anderson found me later, they couldn't avenge Emily. When I arrived at the venue, I indeed saw Charles and Andrew. They were seated in the VIP section, accompanied by an older man, around 60, with sharp eyes, clearly someone with significant experience. Given our current status, Emily and I naturally took our seats in the VIP section, led by Secretary Lisa. I could feel the sharp, hostile gazes behind me, but I remained calm. Seeing me composed, Emily also felt reassured. When the bidding for the property began, I glanced at Secretary Lisa, who understood and kept raising her hand. As the price climbed higher and higher, even Charles seemed to struggle. The older man beside him spoke up.
Young man, some things are beyond your reach at your age.
The venue was quiet, and we were seated close enough to hear clearly.
An additional 10 million.
You're just a future son-in-law of the Anderson family, and you dare to spend so lavishly? Do you really think the Anderson family will tolerate you? You're just a joke.
You wish. Do you want to lose both hands?
Seeing Andrew's frustration, Charles stood up and pointed at me.
Ethan, if you still consider me your father, give up on this property, and there will still be a place for you at Alex's family's table.
Andrew, where do you get the nerve? When your stick landed on me, did you think you were my father? When you kicked me out at 2 years old, did you think you were my father? When you paraded around with this son who isn't even related to you, did you think you were my father? Or had you already betrayed my mother, and he's your illegitimate child?
Andrew's hands began to tremble with anger, and the people in the venue watched with interest.
Secretary Lisa raised the bid. I must have this property.
Emily patted my chest.
Don't be angry, don't be angry, we'll get this property.
She waved her little fist in front of me. I grabbed it.
Okay, I won't be angry.
I didn't realize my eyes had already reddened.
Everyone sit down. What kind of behavior is this? To achieve great things, you must remain calm.
The price continued to rise to an unprecedented level. I heard whispers around me.
Does this guy really think he's something special? Will the Anderson family really pay this price for him?
He'll probably be kicked out of the Anderson family.
A relationship is just that. The Anderson family can easily find an excellent son-in-law.
Andrew clearly thought the same, as I heard him snickering. Charles gritted his teeth and raised the bid, probably wishing he could tear me apart. I was tempted to call it off, as continuing like this wouldn't benefit the Anderson family. Seeing my hesitation, Secretary Lisa nudged my arm, signaling me to look back. The murmuring had stopped abruptly, and I saw my father-in-law approaching us with large strides.
You once said the Anderson family was Luna's support. Now I tell you, the Anderson family is your support too.
Dad.
Father's gaze grew even more intense. He waved his hand.
Keep adding, the Anderson family doesn't care about these small amounts.
The bidding price had already reached 3 significant figures, which was the entire fortune of Alex's family. The old man stood up and left, leaving Charles and Andrew looking at each other in dismay. Their expressions were quite unpleasant.
Ethan, I don't have a son like you.
Oh, my father is Mr. Anderson.
Charles was so angry he almost choked. We secured the land and it was handed over to me. I began to work on it, using the valuable information I had gathered from past news. During this time, I didn't stay idle. I sought out the doctor who attended to my mother during her difficult childbirth and confirmed some things. Then I went to my stepmother Diane's hometown and discovered some disgusting clues. When everything was ready, I arranged to meet Andrew. He looked a bit haggard, probably having a tough time lately. But the moment he saw me, he became arrogant again.
Your high branch is broken, huh? Are you thinking of asking me to plead for you to return to Alex's family?
I just raised my chin.
If you kneel down and kowtow to me now, I might take you back home.
Hey, don't push your luck.
My temper, after being reborn, couldn't tolerate this. I slapped him hard.
Now, can we sit down and talk?
Andrew was stunned by my slap. I used a lot of force, and the red mark on his face was deep and asymmetrical, making my hand itch again.
Young man, don't be too hot-headed.
Unexpectedly, he had brought someone with him, someone who had been following him at a distance. I hadn't noticed it was the old man from the auction. The old man sat down opposite me, bypassing Andrew. Andrew looked at me, raising his chin, still proud for some reason.
Old man, you have some skills, but not much.
I poured myself a cup of tea, not intending to serve the two of them. The old man wasn't angry.
Let's hear it.
I'm not here for you today. If you want to sit here, I don't mind, but I don't plan to chat with you.
I looked at Andrew.
You should recognize these things, right?
I spread out the folder in my hand, which contained many photos of his mother and the doctor, the hospital room door, and the old village. Andrew jumped up instinctively.
You?
Don't get excited, as long as you recognize them. Now I tell you, I know everything about you. From now on, you will live in constant fear.
I patted the folder and got up to leave. The old man slammed the table.
Did I say you could leave? You, young man, have no manners.
As soon as he spoke, many men in black suits rushed in from the door. My heart sank, they came prepared. I scanned the room and suddenly saw a familiar figure. It was him, the one who had dealt a fatal blow to Emily in my previous life. So, they took orders from the old man.
Ha, in broad daylight, are you planning to kidnap me?
I quickly calmed down. He, Andrew, Alex's family, and this old man who appeared midway, all had to pay the price.
We are indeed going to invite you.
The old man spoke to himself, Andrew smiling. I also smiled.
Do you think I came alone?
As I spoke, the restaurant door slammed shut. The staff and customers inside stood up and positioned themselves behind me. They were all undercover agents. I came prepared today.
I have a folder here. This folder contains evidence of your collusion with outsiders and your illicit plans.
When the old man appeared at the auction, I knew that in my past life, Alex's family was just a pawn, and Andrew and stepmother Diane were pawns among pawns. They were greedy for wealth and willingly played their roles. And my biological father was even more foolish.
Being a spy means being prepared to be caught.
I tossed the folder, and the papers detailing their years of selling Kyoto's economic intelligence fluttered down. Such a third-rate family, unnoticed, could infiltrate through flattery. Andrew, at Kyoto University, could meet various people and gather bits of information. This information was then analyzed by specialists and applied in various industries, forming an effective information chain.
You're slandering us.
Save those words for the police.
You bastard, how can you do this to us? We did nothing wrong. We know nothing.
Emily unknowingly walked up to him, raised her hand, and her sharp nails left a deeper red mark on his face than my punch did.
He insulted you.
She looked a bit aggrieved as she returned to my side. I held her, warming her hand with my breath.
You're truly my blessing.
We kissed, ignoring Andrew's screams and the old man's commotion. But nothing could overpower the sight of a pair of silver handcuffs. When Charles arrived with stepmother Diane at the school window, Emily fiercely tried to chase them away. Feeling her protectiveness, I grinned and pulled her to stand in front of them.
Where did you take my son?
Hand over Andrew, or I'll call the police.
Yes, expose this to the media, ruin your reputation, and get you kicked out of the Anderson family.
Stepmother Diane and Charles tried to corner me with their words. I yawned.
Oh, you don't know yet? He committed a crime and has already been taken by the police. I paused, then added, oh, and that old man, the one who was supposed to be your benefactor, was taken too.
You're lying. My son is law-abiding. You must be framing him. Are you still part of Alex's family? Do you still recognize me as your father?
Are you still part of Alex's family? Do you still recognize me as your father?
Charles, I stopped recognizing you long ago. The day my mom passed away, the day you kicked me out, the day you brought home a new wife and a new son. I had many hopes, but you destroyed them all. Now, I will destroy your hopes.
I spoke each word clearly.
She, the so-called stepmother, had premeditated everything. She and her accomplices plotted against my mother, leading to her death on the operating table. Her meeting with you was part of a plan from the start. Andrew is the son of a criminal. They dragged Alex's family into the abyss for that criminal's ambitions, and you accepted him as your son, betraying me, my mom, and Alex's family. You deserve this.
Every word I said was a sharp knife, piercing Charles's heart. Stepmother Diane was already panicking, looking at me in disbelief. After days of interrogation, the company's tax evasion and money laundering should have been exposed. How could the company's legal representative escape? And for the crime against my mother, where could stepmother Diane run?
Emily, call the police. These are the ones who slipped through the net.
Charles collapsed to the ground, looking at me, tears streaming down his face.
Crocodile tears. You reap what you sow.
I waved dismissively, feeling nothing but disdain. Emily was still healthy and vibrant, and Alex's family would no longer exist in Kyoto from today. I personally brought down Alex's family. In the end, I received an apology letter, said to be written by Charles himself, with tears and snot. But I didn't even open it, throwing it straight into the trash. Holding Emily's hand, we walked down the tree-lined path.
Emily, marry me.
She smiled, then started crying. I held her, gently comforting her. The future would be sweet. The past life is over, only this life matters.